Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to Go Time, your source for wide-ranging discussions from all around the Go community. Find us on the web at gotime.fm, on the Fediverse at GoTime, at changelog.social, and on X at GoTimeFM. Thanks to our partners at Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your app as close to your users as possible. Find out how at Fly.io. Okay, here we go.
Our friends at Fire Hydrant offer modern engineering teams less stress from ring to retro, full end-to-end incident management, alerting, on-call, and of course, streamlining every aspect of your incident process. From webhook to alert trigger to notifications to incidents open to retro tasks to mean time to X analytics, everything is inside Fire Hydrant for modern engineering teams. And what you're about to hear are real reactions from PagerDuty users when seeing signals from Fire Hydrant for the first time.
PagerDuty, I don't want to say they're evil, but they're an evil that we've had to maintain. I know all of our engineering teams, as well as myself, are interested in getting this moving the correct direction. As right now, just managing and maintaining our user seats has become problematic.
That's really good. Actually, this is a consistent problem for us and teams. Is that covering these sorts of ad hoc time frames is very difficult. Putting in like overrides and specific days and different new shifts is quite onerous.
Well, and you did the most important piece, which is didn't tie them together, because that's half the problem with PagerDuty, right? Is I get all these alerts and then I get an incident per alert. And generally speaking, when it goes sideways, you get lots of alerts because lots of things are broken, but you only have one incident.
Yeah, I'm super impressed with that, because being able to assign to different teams is an issue for us, because like the one alert fires for one team and then it seems like to have to bounce around, and it never does, which then means that we have tons of communication issues because like people aren't updated.
No, I mean, to be open and honest, when can we switch?
Okay, the next step is to go to firehydrant.com/signals, assemble the team, and work the problem without a single swivel of the chair. Fire Hydrant delivers end-to-end incident management and on-call alerting for the modern software teams. Get started for free. Once again, firehydrant.com/signals.
Hello, and welcome to Go Time. This week, we're talking about the news, or at least some of it. For this episode, I have two wonderful co-hosts. I'm joined by Ian Lobshire. How are you doing today, Ian?
I'm doing wonderful.
Excellent. And I'm also joined by Johnny Borsico. How are you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing all right.
All right. So yeah, we got a couple news articles that were, I guess, they're all not news articles. Some of them are like social media posts, but also we got a whole bunch of articles that we're going to talk about, a whole bunch of news we're going to talk about. And first up is this discussion from Reddit about what might happen if Google decided to part with the core Go team and what that might mean for Go's future adoption.
Let's start by explaining why this came up. The layoffs at Google. They appear to have fired a large number of the Flutter team, the Dart team, and a lot of their Python teams. Just a little bit crazy there.
Is this like Google's uncanny ability to get rid of useful products that people still use and love? They're like, well, let's extend this philosophy to language teams. And it's not just products in the chopping block. It's programming languages, it's frameworks.
I feel like we need a verb. We need a verb for Google getting rid of useful things, like inboxing or something.
Inboxing, or what was that? What was the really popular one? Google waving it. We could call it
waving.
Oh man, if you're old enough to remember Google Wave, well, I am, so I'm not gonna say anything bad about it. But dang, man, Google's been waving off products for a long time, huh?
Ooh, that's a good verb for that too. Yeah, it's like, oh, wave goodbye to those products. that's the background of it. As Ian said, they've decided to lay off some more people. This is like an interesting time in the tech industry as far as big companies doing lots of rounds of layoffs of various different teams. But given that background and context, there's like quite a bit of discussion, some thoughts. I think that the top comment or the top, because this is in Reddit, so the top reply is basically kind of saying, there's probably not going to be that big of a problem if they did, but they probably won't do it. What do you think? What do you guys think?
Well, Go is open source, right? So I don't know. There's a lot of open source projects that, I mean, it is open source. That's great, but we can't underestimate basically having a corporate benefactor, right, behind certain corporate projects. If they weren't funding the development of these things in some way, whether it's directly or sponsoring the teams that work, the contributors that were out in the community that sort of keep something alive. I don't think we can underestimate the power of a mega funder like Google. So, but I'd say that there are enough large companies using Go that rely on Go, whether it's at the infrastructure level or part of their product or whatever it is, that I think that's my hope at least, that if Google were to sort of take a back seat on sort of the leadership for Go, other companies would definitely be vying for that spot. They would definitely want to step in. Now, what the governance model would be, right now it's the Go team that decides what goes in, obviously with input and contribution from the community, but it's a centralized sort of corporate decision body, basically. And so far, I can't really complain with some of the decisions they've made. Not everything has been smooth. You can't really expect it to be, but they've done a pretty good job. So if all of that were to change, we don't know what we would get for leadership of the language now, right? So it would certainly give a sort of a branding blow to Go, not a critical technical blow, right? But it will also create a leadership sort of uncertainty, right, for a while until the dust sort of settled.
I feel like if Google did just like, okay, we don't want to do Go anymore, we're going to get rid of it, we're going to lay off the whole team. I feel like one of the other big tech companies like Amazon or Microsoft would just pick up that whole team and be like, okay, then we'll just start doing this. I mean, like Microsoft, what they basically almost did that with OpenAI, and that was a whole lot more people than the Go team. And as we'll talk about later, like Microsoft seems to have a pretty significant investment in Go. So it seems like some kind of corporate benefactor, someone would want to actually pick this up and run with it if it was kind of the whole team just being let go at once, or like a foundation. Because I think as mentioned in the Reddit post, there's like the CNCF has so many different projects that are written in Go. You're not going to rewrite Kubernetes at this point in another language. So it'd be...
Some will try.
I mean, people will try. But like, is the CNCF really going to... Like, if they had to weigh it, are they going to let Go just disappear and then try and rewrite all of their projects in another language? Or would they just be like, okay, we're going to help pick up the slack?
So by comparison, does C have a major corporate body behind it? I mean, still around. It's still being used, and it's certainly underpins a lot of technologies that we build on top of. So
I mean, C is a standard, so they have the standards body that's behind it. Just like C++ is also a standard, so it has like a standards body behind it.
We've also seen these languages be spun off corporate manufacturers before, right? Like Rust survived Mozilla's
right.
dive. So yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it did, I'm not sure there's a ton to worry about.
Yeah, I feel like the more worrying thing would be like the slow starvation of resources from the Go team. Like if Google like slowly started under-investing in Go, and then you'd have to be like, okay, well, that almost seems worse than just a smooth like, okay, we're just getting out of the whole game, like goodbye, we're shutting down this whole division. Figure it out, rest of the world.
Laying off half the team would be way worse than all of them, right?
Right. So yeah, if all of a sudden, Russ Cox has been reassigned to something else, and Ian Lance Taylor all of a sudden, other projects, or all like well-known, people who lead the team, at least technically, sort of change roles and get reassigned to something. I don't know. I'd be scratching my head. I'd be like wondering, What's about to happen here? Are we getting waved off, or like, what's happening?
I do wonder what would happen to like the module repo and the go.dev site, the docs site, because that's all Google hosted right now, right?
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of infrastructure that is currently hosted by Google. There have to be some plan to actually migrate it. But even, in that case, I don't think Google would be like, oh, we're just going to shut everything down. I think they'd probably do something like Google Domains and be like, okay, we're going to find somebody else who wants to have this now.
Squarespace now hosts go.dev.
I'm sure it'd be picked up by like Amazon or Microsoft, but
it's now go.squarespace.com.
That is so freaking funny. Oh man. There's some ads that come along when you go check out some vulnerabilities.
It's like, oh yes, you edit the Go website in their nice WYSI way.
There's some ads and some shops that just gets auto suggested to you in your go.mod file.
Oh Lord.
check out these shoes. They're 50% off.
Oh,
right,
Lord.
you go.mod.
You imported this module, and people that import this module like lasagna. So here's some good frozen lasagna that you can buy. Yeah.
Oh man, oh, it's so funny. I have tears. Oh, please, Google, don't do this.
I don't think Google is going to sell Go to Squarespace. I think we're okay.
Oh man,
could Google even sell Go? Is that a thing they could do?
I mean, I'm pretty sure they own like the copyrights. So yes, I mean it'd be kind of weird, but I think
they own the brand, yeah.
Because right, the people that built Go worked at Google at the time, and Google has those all-encompassing contracts that are like, we own all of it.
So Go is open source. What does intellectual property law look like for open source? Like open source means you just can use it freely, reuse it, and do all kinds of things, right? Does that mean? It'd
mean that you couldn't, like if you forked it, you couldn't call it Go. Like it's the same thing that happened with like Terraform, right? Where they forked Terraform, but they can't call it Terraform because Terraform is intellectual property of HashiCorp. So Go is intellectual property, like the brand of it.
Wait, who forked Terraform?
Get off topic a little bit.
CNCF did with OpenTofu.
Ian's been living under a rock for the last couple of weeks.
Where are you bad? Maybe we should do more of this.
Wait, was this after they sold to IBM? Is that?
No, it was way before. This was like 6 months ago.
How did I miss this? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe because you don't use Terraform that often.
HashiCorp did the Redis thing, or I guess Redis did the HashiCorp thing, which did like the so many other companies thing, where they relicensed it as its dual license, and everybody was like, no. And so the group of people got together and they forked Terraform and they made OpenTofu.
All right. Another thing to add to my reading list.
Yeah. Thankfully, there's only one fork, unlike Redis, where there's like so many.
Wait, isn't there there's an Apache fork of Redis now, right?
There's a lot of... Okay, we're getting off topic.
Oh, I'm sure there's lots of forks of Redis. I mean, my mom probably has a fork of Redis at this point. It's so it's fine. Like it'll be interesting if IBM sort of reverts the whole Terraform licensing. Like debacle.
They did. I think I was reading something where I think IBM does have a fork of Terraform, like an open source fork of Terraform, and everybody's like, "Huh?" It's it's an interesting situation, but so I guess the answer to the question is like, yes, you could sell Go. Or at least the IP to it. Like, I mean, you could, if you sold it to someone like Oracle, I'm sure they'd try and find a way to un-open source it as well. But I think everybody else would just kind of take it and run with it and be like, okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, let's just all hold our breath and hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like which part?
Specifically the Squarespace bit, but all of it.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we're in agreement there. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all pretty safe from Google abandoning Go, but also from like a contribution standpoint, I think like the majority of core contributions come from outside of Google. So it's not like the language would necessarily slow down in development. You just have to there's really, you need to find a new home for things. And as I think you said, Johnny, like a new governance model to figure out like how do proposals happen, what gets into the core language as far as like big things, not like the small things where people are just kind of like maintaining a library or something like that. So yeah, I mean it'll be interesting to see. But for now, we are safe. There is no risk of Go being sold to Squarespace.
As far as we know, I mean, we're three, peeps on a podcast, just making wild guesses, as to what a mega corporation might or might not do. I mean, they're laying off entire language teams and entire frameworks. Like, can you imagine if you're like, what is it, like Flutter they laid off or something, or Dart or whatever it is? Can you imagine if you've invested like years into these frameworks and languages, and all of a sudden on some corporate execs whim, like, well, no, we need to now divert these funds into AI. No more of these side things. These are not core to our mission. These do not align with our objectives. And all of a sudden, just with that sentence, your livelihood is now at risk. Can you fathom it?
I mean, yes, but
do not put all your eggs in one basket, folks. Do not put your eggs, all of them, in one basket. Never, never, ever.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, especially with all this AI development and whatnot, to see where everything goes.
Well, speaking of corporate benefactors that might come to Go's rescue, there's a story about Microsoft on here, isn't there?
Yes. Very good segue, Johnny. So we have a nice little blog post from Microsoft about the fact that they have started a Go blog. Although they've kind of snuck in here as well that they basically have their own fork of Go they use internally, and that they're contributing things upstream, which is super interesting. I think it's not common, but it's not necessarily uncommon for companies to have their own internal forks of things that they use to do little tweaks and whatnot. But I think the whole like we're going to upstream as much of the changes as we can is a very interesting philosophy for them to have. Yeah, what are your guys' thoughts?
Well, I mean, first, it's not just a internal fork now. I mean, it's public. You can use it if you want.
Does it do Go routines differently? Does it like shell out to C# or something?
No, if you actually go through and read what it is, I mean, it's basically just crypto changes to comply with like government standards, right?
So like FIPS, the FIPS standard and stuff.
I have no idea what FIPS is, but FIPS 140-2.
Why? You're not familiar with FIPS 140-2?
I'm not.
No. Nobody is, man. unless this is your bread and butter, your daily work. I don't think anybody like even pays attention to these things unless they have to.
I think it's like government contract stuff, right?
It's the Federal Information Processing Standards.
Yeah. I guess if you're an engineer working with the government, these things are going to be very familiar to you.
Yeah, it's for the non-military government agencies and contractors.
So I assume government agencies and military contractors do something different.
Military. Yeah, the military agencies and military contractors.
Undisclosed.
Do something probably a bit more advanced, more secure. I don't know.
Yeah, more kept close to the vest. You don't want to reveal that information to the enemy. Yeah. Yeah, so let's get back to the news, huh?
But yeah, so I think this is interesting of Microsoft taking an even stronger stance of investing in Go. I feel like that's part of their whole like trajectory of trying to become a big open source company again, like when they bought GitHub and all this other stuff. So yeah, and I think didn't GitHub have a lot of investment in Go too? So I think they probably got a ton of Go investment from that. Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting. Like more versions of Go also sounds nice, right? We got the two big ones, I guess. And
is that an unpopular opinion? Did we already jump to that bit?
What?
More versions of Go?
Sorry, not versions, more implementations of Go.
Why do you want more implementations of Go?
No,
you don't like the one you have?
Huh? I like the one that we have, but we already have two at least. Well, I guess three, depending on how you count, right? We have the GC compiler, which is the main Go compiler. You have GCC Go. You have Tiny Go. And there's like a few others. Like, is there one that works with the GNU compiler system? GCC Go. And there's LL Go. That's the other one I was thinking of. Yeah. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different implementations of Go, which is how the designers meant it to be. So adding another one in there seems like a fine thing to do.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
I'll give it a pass.
You can disagree, Johnny, if you want to disagree.
No. I'll allow it.
I'd like to know who is using these other implementations.
I know, like, it depending on what architecture you're targeting, some people use like either GCC Go or like the LLVM Go, like LL Go. If it's like, if there's a backend for those compilers that the standard Go compiler doesn't have. Like for a while, I think there wasn't support for like the Z architecture, IBM's like mainframe architecture. Like it wasn't officially supported within the Go compiler, but it was supported within LLVM's backend. So people were using LLGo for that. Or if you want like just compatibility with other languages in a nicer way, you can use the, those alternative compilers. And then obviously for things like TinyGo, it's like, well, if you want to run Go on a microprocessor, you want something that is not going to give you like a 80 megabyte binary.
Yeah. So what do we think this means for Go? In their like announcement post, they say they're going to be posting about running Go workloads on Azure. You think we're going to see more compatibility there? I don't use Azure, so I don't even know how it works with Go. But I know AWS has some nice built-in. Like you can run Go on Lambda, right?
Right. Yeah, I assume that some of their their products are going to support Go natively. I imagine they already have quite a bit of Go I mean, like, because I feel like anything that has like Kubernetes integration, like if you're doing all of that work, you're probably doing a lot of that work in Go. So you probably already have like substantial Go expertise within your cloud infrastructure teams. And just like so many CNCF things are written. I mean, so many cloud things are written in Go that I don't think you can have a cloud company that doesn't at least have a pretty strong familiarity with Go.
If you do anything in the cloud, you whether or not you interact with it directly, you probably have Go somewhere in your stack. So I think that's fairly certain at this point.
Yeah, I mean, all three of the big cloud providers all have Kubernetes systems, like product offerings.
Right.
So that right there is good.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see other companies doing investment. Also, I think that helps, kind of with what we were talking about before, where there's just less of a risk of like one company being able to do something that might deal a critical blow to Go. Because now there's like, oh, okay, well, if Microsoft does, and if over the course of the next few years really establish themselves as a big contributor to Go, then if there ever is a risk of Google saying we don't want to do this anymore, there's an obvious successor, there's an obvious company to pick the language up and keep going with it. So
yeah, I think this is a good thing overall. I think I was joking earlier that all of a sudden having a job at Microsoft in the Go engineering group all of a sudden doesn't seem like a bad thought. They need somebody to evangelize this stuff internally, right?
I mean, it's not the Microsoft of the old times of when Johnny first started programming in the ancient time.
It's a different world, my friend. I mean, it's a different world. It's not when I used to install, Windows with diskettes on machines.
those Windows floppy disks.
It's not those times. Those floppies. You're no longer.
How long ago was that?
Don't ask. Please.
I can't imagine Windows on a floppy. Is it like 30 of them?
It was a decent number, yeah.
Yeah, just about.
It was annoying to install.
Here is Windows 4 megabytes at a time.
Yeah, now insert disk 17.
Yeah.
You just hit the little button, pop out the 16th one.
Is that what a floppy was? 4.3 megabytes, is that right?
Oh, they varied in sizes over time. It depends on when you entered into this game. I mean, you could have entered at the five and a half, was it 5.5 or 5.25?
Yeah, 3.5.
And then we sized it down to the 3.5 inch or something. But in between there, like we went through all kinds of various kinds of mediums and zip drives and this and that. I mean, the kids these days, they have no idea how good they have it.
A zip drive was legit a tape, right?
No, it was a zip was a magnetic platter.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was just a
yeah.
fancy one. Because I grew up in the era of zip drives and floppy. Like when I was in high school, we had to save all of our Word documents onto floppy disks for classes or whatever. It was, oh god. I don't remember that era of life. And then thumb drives came along, and that just changed everything.
That did change everything. I remember when a 5 meg thumb drive was like $50 or something. It was like, yeah, it was something ridiculous. But at the time, it was like, wow, 5 megabytes. You know how much you can store in that? That's like 12, Wolfensteins or something. It was crazy.
Wolfensteins.
Now it's like, wow, 5 megabytes. That's like a tenth of an image coming out of a camera. That's. But yes, back to Microsoft being a redeemed entity.
Those tangents, those fun, entertaining tangents.
This is not news from the late 90s of Microsoft. But yeah, no, it's nice seeing that they're because a few years ago when Microsoft was like, yes, we're going to try and become a better open source contributor. We're gonna basically atone for our sins from the past. I think everybody was kind of like, oh, or we're not really sure. And then there was the problems and issues of like when they bought GitHub, and everybody was like, uh-oh, is GitHub gonna look a little weird? Are we gonna have Clippy on GitHub? And I think they did a pretty good job with that. So seeing them kind of continue all of that it's a really nice thing.
Yeah, it does feel like just a continued path for them. I mean, they did .NET Core, they did the GitHub acquisition, they had Linux subsystem for Windows. So excited to see them get on the Go train now.
Yeah, that part's nice. Is like, oh yeah, you're seeing this gradual progression of what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's like, okay, nice. You aren't like pulling the rug out from under us.
Yeah, I think GitHub got better after Microsoft too. Like unlimited free repos, free private repos. I enjoyed that.
Got cheaper for sure. I remember it was like $4 a month for all of this stuff. That's great.
What's up, Go Time? Adam here in the breaks, talking to Sagar Bachu, co-founder and CEO of Speakeasy. Speakeasy is the complete platform for great API developer experience. Generate SDKs in TypeScript, Python, Go, Java, C#, and PHP. You know what, Sagar, imagine I have some listeners who write Go because, they're listening to Go Time. And they say, I maintain our SDK and I don't mind doing it, but I realize there are ways to generate our SDKs using the open API specification. Now, give me an exact workflow end to end from curious to leveraging Speakeasy to generate and maintain SDKs for an API written in Go.
Let's take the case of you're building an API from scratch today. If you're building an API in Go, you're probably going to start with one of the common frameworks to build a Go API. I would highly encourage looking at frameworks like Goa and Shuma, which actually give you a lot of scaffolding out of the box to not just write your API, but also to make sure that you get an open API spec generated off of each build of your API. That is like a really great foundational building block to invest in as a company, because that means all future development of the API is guaranteed to be described and documented out of the box. Once you do that, it's, I think, a good idea to have some basic concepts of ownership built in. So if you have multiple services or microservices, make sure your service is annotated by teams that own it, and then also give your resources simple names that get reflected in the open API spec. Once you do that, the spec is going to get created every time you build your API. So through CI/CD, your spec will get generated every time you build and host the API. Make sure that spec gets pushed to a change management solution. I think that's where Speakeasy can come in. You actually push the spec to us on every build, and we'll create a version snapshot of it. So you have it we give you prominence of it, so you have it for future builds and future work that you want to do on it. Once that happens, you can attempt to generate an SDK, and we'll hook directly into your CI/CD and grab the latest version of the spec. Every time that happens, we'll compare the spec to a previous version, tell you if there's any breaking changes, and send you a pull request on any repo to generate that new code. Once you get to that first version of the SDK, that's where you really want to do some human-in-the-loop investment and take a look at, does the SDK suit your needs? Is it ergonomic in the way you think it should be? And then also is it documented? Is it described well? If there are gaps in that documentation, you can go back and add that in your code base. But if this is not a new API and this is a legacy API, you can use tools like overlays to actually add in that documentation without altering the visual spec itself or altering the source code. So you do some investment there to make sure that the SDK output is ergonomic, well described and documented. And once that happens, you kind of set as an autopilot. So every time your spec changes, Speakeasy will send you new pull requests. And once you merge a pull request, it gets published and released on GitHub. Thank God Go doesn't have a separate package manager. It's all GitHub. So the moment the Git repo is updated, you get a brand new SDK version released to your customers. That's the complete workflow, all the way from your API server to your CI/CD to actually having generated and hosted SDK.
So take me in as close as you can. Give me an ant's eyes view. Why is this beneficial for a team?
I think it's really beneficial when you start thinking about growth and scaling the company. The moment you have more than one developer touching an API, let's say you have 2 and 3 developers touching and iterating on an API, you want all those changes to be captured and documented somewhere so that someone else, not necessarily the same developer, can decide whether that API needs to get distributed to outside the company. Doing that upfront investment means every API change is described and documented, and every N+1 developer that comes on the team is also going to onboard that much faster, right? Because everything, like you're not going to need to know about how every service is constructed. You're just going to be able to look at the open API spec and say, we have 3 APIs today. 2 of them are generally available, one's in beta, and then one's on V1 and one's on V2, right? That's like you at the most granular level, like that upfront documentation means you're going to be able to move a lot faster on other development going forward. So I would say like that's if I had to say one huge benefit of that is doing that upfront investment means every developer building an API going forward is not going to have to like learn all the context of every API. It's just going to be there described in a simple single document.
Okay, go to speakeasyapi.dev. You get your first SDK generator for free. Once again, speakeasyapi.dev, and tell them GoTime sent you.
What's next? We are going to, I think we want to talk about, this nice post from the Go blog about evolving the standard library with the first V2 package in the form of MathRand getting a new version. This one feels like it's a long time coming. I've always had my own dislikes of how MathRand has worked, and especially I get why they made it different from CryptoRand, so you couldn't like accidentally use MathRand when you'd want to use CryptoRand, but it was still very annoying to have to use like a completely different API if you wanted to have a pseudo random number generator instead of a cryptographically random one. But yeah, I think this is like an interesting next step when it comes to all of the changes that we've been making that have been made over the years when it comes to like really realizing that Go 2 vision, even though Go 2 isn't a thing, it is just a set of features being added to Go to allow it to advance. It's nice to see that we're kind of coming to the full view of that and seeing like the standard library being able to incorporate newer things in these types of changes without breaking backward compatibility.
It's the first V2 in the standard library. We went from, after all these years, we went from theoretical to practical in the standard library itself with regards to Go module package versioning.
So what are your thoughts, Ian? You got any thoughts?
I don't know. I think the article makes some really interesting points, kind of about the drift between the version 1 and version 2, which we don't want to happen, right? So it goes on to say like any V2 package will be able to completely do what a V1 package does at the time of release. So it's not going to be like a V2 package that we get part of another package, which I think is good. And it also goes on to say that the plan is to kind of make the V1 packages just a thin wrapper over V2 packages. So V1 packages can, get bug updates and fixes from changes in the V2 packages, which I think is great. I hope that works out.
Oh, change the V1 package to be wrapped around the V. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's smart, and I hope it works. It doesn't seem like it's going to work for everything, but
it worked for. Well, what did it work for? I'm trying to think of a package where that actually. No, I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of when context was formally introduced, basically went from experimental to being part of the standard library. Back in the day, used to use HTTP package to do new request, right? HTTP.new request. When the context package was formalized, new with request was introduced, but the existing new request was simply changed to under the hood, create a context for you. That way, every request would have a context by default, right? So things like that, where changes are introduced to the language and under the hood, you don't have to go change your code. I think there's a great ways to do that. But like you said, Ian, there are some APIs that are going to be so different that you can't really, maybe, some values, get added. You need to now invoke, with more arguments. Some things have changed. Maybe some value, a particular data type is no longer required or is not required. I mean, there's going to be some situations where it just can't work. And I think you are going to see basically what happened with, the math-ran package here. You're going to see a V2 sort of being introduced for that new capability. And thankfully, I mean, I do like this approach fundamentally, right? I mean, this is doing exactly what the Go compatibility promise promised, basically not breaking any existing code out there. When the API changes or when there's something fundamentally different about how a particular behavior works, we rely on the V2. And I think it's not going to be just the job of the standard library to do that, right? Things like linters are going to have an impact on this, right? Even right now, like basically, I tried to get a random number generator initialized, earlier this week, and then I'm not sure which one of my linters. I have like a dozen at this point. I'm not sure which one, caught it, but it told me that, hey, you no longer need to do the whole dance with the, seeding of the time, that blah, blah, blah. You don't need to do that. Just use the math-ran, package, as you normally would, right? So it was nice. I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. This was introduced back in March. I'm so used to doing it this particular way. I didn't even realize I was doing it the old way, right? I didn't even realize I could do it, the new and better way, right? So my linter, my editor, my development environment sort of helped me move along, right, and catch up with the future kind of thing. With current state, right? So I think it's going to be the job of basically the entire ecosystem to move everybody towards the new thing when there's a new thing.
Yeah, I think that brings up one of the great strengths of like the semantic import versioning, that V1 and V2 can just exist in the same code base and you can gradually move. So like you said, you can use that in V2 now, right? Without changing everything.
Yeah. I also think with the fact they added the functionality that in the go.mod file, there's like the version of Go you're compiling with, which I think allows them to fix a lot of things that might have been attempted to be fixed with like a V2 package in the past, or like a V2 of the language in the past. Like I think the shadowing stuff that they just got rid of, I think is one of those things where it's like, oh, well, it would have been very difficult to fix this before, but now that you can be like, oh, okay, you're compiling for this older version of the language, so we're going to keep those semantics the same, or you're in this newer version of the language, now the semantics are different, or like the ability to say just use a number in a range, which I've wanted forever. Like just being able to do that kind of stuff and be able to like detect based on like, oh yeah, like you're on this version of the compiler, so we know that we have these features, we have this functionality. I think helps make sure that we don't rush to V2 packages when we don't need them, and that we actually go to the V2 when we actually have a pressing need to do something at a higher level that's different, like something semantically different, instead of just some like, I don't like this syntax, or I don't like this particular thing.
Y'all excited for any V2 packages?
I don't think anybody's excited about any V2 packages. It's just, that's the system we've got.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like semantic import versioning.
Love the one you're with.
I think semantic import versioning is still kind of garbage, but I mean, like, if it's what we got, it's what we got.
I like it now. Like,
I mean, I haven't used many, because I think so many people just pinned at like version 0 or version 1 to avoid the problem. But like when there were modules that had like, were on version 5 and they had a whole bunch of packages, like trying to get the right package to get imported using Go imports was a pain for a long time. I don't know if that's been fixed, but that was definitely like my biggest headache, was just like writing code became much more annoying with semantic import versioning, because it applied to individual packages and not to like the module as a whole, which I think is a fine way to do it. But I just think there's still all of those problems. But I think it probably works pretty fine for the standard library, because there's not going to be as many, like, it's going to be a long time before we have like a V5 of a package. And I think there's going to be a lot of very careful things that are done to make sure that like when you import something, you get like the correct version of it.
I'd be surprised if we ever got to a V3. Because they're not V2ing packages unless they made up.
You live long enough, Ian. You live long enough, and funny things happen. Like we no longer have zip drives, right? Like, so don't dismiss it. It's fine. Just give it time. Stick around.
All right, let's put a bet on it, and I'll talk to you in 10 years, and we'll see who was right.
we'll have an inaugural. We'll have no. What do you call them? The 1000th episode or something. Yeah, and then we'll be invited back as old timers to come talk. Back in my day, we had V2. That was the most you could expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because the only reason you really need a V2 is if you want to reuse a name. Because otherwise, you just make a new package with a new name, right? If it's like, oh, this is the more advanced thing, it's like, okay, here's a new name. Kind of what they did with like the FS package, where they were just like, okay, well, we're just going to make a new package and a new name for this new thing. It's not like the OSV2 package or something like that.
Or you can do what like some projects did. They pretty much said, listen, just assume that when you do a go get the next time, even though the package path is going to be the same, you're getting a V2. If you want the V1 of anything, you better pin to a commit hash, bro.
Oh god, the bad old days.
I did just add a package to something I was working on, and I think it was like version 44, and I was so confused. Oh, I wish I could remember what it was.
I mean, I guess like some people just like were like, oh, semantic import versioning. We're just gonna go hog wild. Like we're just gonna
every release new version.
I think it's like it's a interesting challenge of our industry that I think like even though I have my gripes with how like semantic import versioning and how a bunch of this stuff works, this does feel like one of the better ways this has been done in the industry, right? Like we've basically successfully managed to move Go into like Go 2, right? Like this is Go version 2 without actually having any breaking changes, which I think is kind of incredible because we didn't have to run into like the thing that happened with Python or happened with like so many other languages where it's just like, oh God, we have these few years of awfulness because we had to make all of these changes at once. And now everybody's mad at us and everybody's stuck on the old thing for an extra decade and we don't know what to do. But with Go, it's just kind of like, it's like you're stuck on the old thing for not that long because you can just move forward. And I think that's also, partly because of Go's history, with like the Go fix tool and a whole bunch of other stuff. That's like, okay, well, we'll just like rewrite your code for you to help you upgrade some of this if we can.
I thank goodness we didn't take a page from the JavaScript community and just start creating polyfills everywhere and transpilers and this and that. And
the JavaScript community is a
be nice. It's
an interesting approach they've taken, which is I feels like they don't have a lot in their standard library, so they have like a crap load of packages, and then their packages all depend on other packages. But it seems to work, right? It's not like they're all like JavaScript hasn't had like the same kind of breaking change problem that Python had, for example, and they've advanced that language considerably over time. So I think it's another approach to solve the same sort of problem, but like. I think the approach that Go took only works if you have some centralized control of the language, right? If you have like the Go team that is making all of these decisions. I think if you have a much more representative democracy style way of doing things, that's going to be a lot harder to do to actually like make sure that, you're charting the right path at the end of the day. So I think what JavaScript did is probably what would have been possible with the type of community that they are. And it works. So,
and to be fair, it's you have people who mean well, all right, that want to advance, the language and the community forward. But you have a lot of incumbents who, basically they have their money is made with the status quo. And, it's the same problem across any and everything, right? Whenever you need to make a change to something, change is disruptive, right? Whenever you if somebody has built an entire business, right, be it browser makers or plugin vendors and this and that, if people don't want change, right? Because whenever you change these things and underlying technology, that means now they have to, put in more costs to also adapt and change their wares. And, that means they're making less money. So the tyranny of shareholders. You know what I mean? You can't keep increasing your costs and not be giving money to shareholders. So there's gonna be like this reminds me of an interesting lesson I had to learn in sort of the early days of my career, where I figured out, right, that technical decisions were rarely purely technical decisions, right? I'd present really well argued, well structured, reasoning, logical sort of proposals for changing from this framework to that framework, this language to that language, or this architectural style to that one, and blah blah, right? With a clear path of migration, not blow things up, but incremental changes, like a release schedule, roadmap. I'd do all this work, right? And then, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll take it from here." And then the decision is made in some room somewhere where I'm not at the table, and and I'm realizing, like, what, you going with this approach? But this makes no sense. Like, technically, it is a poor, bad decision. You don't know what the heck you're doing. Like, I would be getting mad about this stuff, and then I realized one day, like, oh crap, it's not about the technical decision all the time, right? There are other factors that I'm not privy to that go into these decisions, right? So yeah, it's the same thing with, and even in the open source community, there's going to be incumbents who don't want things to change that much because they have a lot at stake, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, forking is a good thing. Like, I remember back when my last couple of, I think maybe like last year or so, of actively doing Drupal development, there was this, big push for the new version of Drupal. It's going to be Drupal 8, and it was going to change everything. And there were a whole bunch of people that are like, we kind of like how Drupal 7 worked and the historical way Drupal works. So we're just going to go fork it and make this other thing. And it seems like both things are thriving. And so it's like, okay, well, if you want the old thing, then go over here, use this backdrop thing. If you want the new thing, then, go use the new Drupal stuff.
Wait, hang on a second. I got to go fork Redis. Speaking of which, do we have another Redis clone or something on our list of news?
Yes, we do. Although,
of course we do.
Any last comments about the Math Ran V2 package, or the evolution of Go?
This is just a thought. I would love to see Go written like that first year compared to now. Like, has it changed that much?
Go look at the commit history.
You mean like someone writing Go in
like an HTTP server written how old is Go? I don't know. I mean V0.
Oh, from like 2009?
2009 to now. Like, it's definitely changed, but not that much.
If you ask Matt Ryer, he can probably tell you, because he's been writing. How I still write Go after 20 years or something. 13
years, he said. Yeah.
30. Yeah, 30. Is that 13?
After 20 years, Johnny, the language isn't 20 years old.
I'm using recruiter math. Sorry. After 32 years of writing Go. This is how I still handle my routes or something, right? Matt will know.
I feel like there'd probably be a bigger delta difference between the initial like open source version of Go and the V1 of Go, like Go 1.0, than it would be between Go 1.0 and now. Like, I feel like that change would probably be very subtle. Like, okay, we have context now. We have like a few of these other things, but like the change in those first few years is probably much more about like, oh, A, probably doesn't even compile with a modern compiler, whereas like something written with Go 1.0 should technically still compile. So yeah, but that would be interesting to do. Maybe someone should go out there and write a blog post about that. On to more forks. Redis. So we have a little Redis re-implemented in Go with SQLite backing it.
You call it SQLite? Wait, hang on. I think we're about to have another debate here.
I flip-flop.
Do you call it GIF or GIF?
Well, I go between SQLite and SQLite, but if we're going to be
pick a side, bro.
Very pedantic, it would be SQLite because the language is called SQL,
and you call it SQL. Like whenever you refer to SQL.
I call it SQL. The vast majority of the time. Sometimes I'll call it SQL. Most of the time I call it SQL.
The only thing worse than SQL is when people call it squeal or
squeal.
I've heard people do that and it's
SQLite. But no, there's like history there of like, it's called SQL because there was another basically competing language that was trademarked called SQL. So they couldn't call it SQL. So they had to call it SQL.
But everybody, but those, if you know, right? You just call it SQL and call it.
Well, that's like, right? Calling everything, like calling tissues Kleenex. It's like, okay, yes, it's technically a tissue. Like everybody knows it's Kleenex. It's okay.
Yeah. We've been having these debates for time immemorial. Like, just the same way we're like, nah, bro, serverless doesn't mean no servers, right? Like we have these conversations all the time, right? But eventually, you just like, you know what? Let me just stop fighting the marketing people and just go with it.
I mean, the hard part is English isn't a phonetic language. Like you can't look at a word and know how it's supposed to be pronounced. So that's half the battle.
Well, some hills I'm not willing to die on. I don't have. How do you
pronounce it? How do you pronounce the image format? It's a GIF or is it GIF?
Okay. Do you refer to the individual known as God? Do you refer to him as Jod?
That's not how pronunciation works, Johnny. G can make a J or a G sound.
Yes. You don't call. I have a friend named George. I don't call him Gorge, although that's kind of funny.
I kind of like that one.
Yeah, it's I guess it's a difference between like, do you see it as like GIF as the word, so you have a GI as like which would be a G, or do you see it as a GR word, which would be like a G, like a J or a G? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It truly does not matter. It's like one of the dumbest debates of like.
You know what? You know what is not a dumb debate though? Tabs or spaces. Choose carefully.
The tabs, because we're writing Go. Like, what do you mean?
All right. Yeah. We're still friends.
Like you literally can't use spaces. Like, I don't know.
Although you could configure your editor every time you hit the tab key, it just adds 4 spaces.
And then Go font will just turn it back into tabs.
Those people must hate Go font. Oh man. They're probably not doing Go anyway.
I mean, if you're a diehard spaces person, then anyway, we're supposed to be talking about Redis.
Yeah, we are.
We got so off track. So I don't know. What are our thoughts about all of these new forks and things of Redis, or this one in particular of Redka?
The good parts. Ooh, the good part. It's already opinionated. The good parts of Redis with SQLite,
as opposed to the bad parts.
You know where all that comes from, right? Remember that book, JavaScript: The Good Parts? And ever since then, people started coming up with the good parts. It's like, Johnny, the good parts. Like, what?
There's also
what do you mean?
The hard way.
Hard way, right.
But I feel like the good parts also with JavaScript was contrasted with the JavaScript, the definitive guide. The definitive guide's like 1,000 pages long, and the good parts is like 150. And you're like,
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's such a nice contrast. You kind of have to be in the publishing business to kind of get the inside joke there.
Yeah.
I would imagine. In any case, Redka. How do you feel about it?
I'm interested in all these new things popping up using SQLite. I know SQLite has always been well used, right? Like, it's popular. But I feel like in the last year, I hear about SQLite more and more and more.
It took off.
Yeah.
You know, I will agree. And, for me personally, what sort of started making it even more relevant in my life is
Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson, exactly. He created Bolt DB, which I for a long time I use constantly. Yeah, he's very knowledgeable in databases and writing database servers and everything else. And he had this project, I think it's called Lightstream, where basically, if your use case is right, you can literally, put SQLite into production and actually have a reliable system that has, continuous, streaming backups, and you don't lose your stuff, right? He kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities, of actually treating SQLite not just as a toy database or something I use locally when I'm developing, or something I use in sort of low power devices, or whatever it is, but actually using it instead of relying on the sort of the go-tos, the Postgres, the MySQL, and so on and so forth. So I think I agree. Like, SQLite is very capable for certain use cases, right? The primary thing for me has always been sort of the lock issue with writes, right? That we can only have one writer at a time. So that creates a problem. In some cases, you kind of have to be clever with how you get around that. And, maybe you just have one writer and a ton of readers, that you have to kind of approach your design architecture a little differently than some extra thinking you have to do around the design of your software, right? When you're not using like a full-blown database like Postgres or MySQL or something like that.
I suppose, although like when you're using, SQLite, it's like you're operating at like many orders of magnitude faster than like a Postgres or a MySQL, because it's just like you don't have a network. You're just kind of there talking straight to disk, so it's a lot faster in general, I think. But I also think like you do have to structure things differently, but I think there's also like the macro structuring of your application differently if you want to put SQLite at the center of what you're doing.
I've seen articles where it's people literally using one SQLite database per user.
Yeah, things like that. Like you can totally, like the moment you start thinking about the problem a little differently, right? It's like, it's just a file on disk. Why not just give each user a file, right? Then when they log in, they have their own database. Like it's a little trippy. Like if you're used to just like the good old style of well-trodden path of, framework servers connecting to databases, RDS databases, relational databases that you need to have connection pools and this and that. I mean, it's very trippy, but the more you think about it, like, why not? Why can't I give every user its own database?
Yeah, I mean, SQLite is also interesting because it's one of those like, actually like very stable, very solid file types. Basically, like the Library of Congress has listed it as one of like their like acceptable file types for data that needs to last like centuries. I think it's the only binary one, because I think the other ones are like text and or like CSV and JSON. But like SQLite is right there next to it, and like that's like a full-fledged system you got right there. And I actually advocate a lot of SQLite used as like an application storage format, which is, I think, why is probably the most popular and most used database in the world.
I think a lot of like the Apple apps ship with a built-in SQLite database, right?
Yeah. And like every browser does as well. Like,
yeah, I think everything ships with SQLite.
It's like if you look at something, you're like, oh, I'm using this application. Where is it storing its data? Probably in an SQLite database. It's probably there.
Probably SQLite, yeah.
I do think it's a good fit for Redis as well, because Redis is already single-threaded, right? It's a queue, right? Like of requests. So that whole write lock doesn't seem as much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, it does fit that kind of use case really well. Even if you want to do like a distributed Redis sort of thing, like I think there's someone that has done it a couple times where they just like they put like Raft on top of Redis. I think it's called SQLite or something like that, and kind of distribute. You can do the same type of thing with Redis, where you put like, Redis and then Raft behind it on top of SQLite, and we can basically do the same thing.
It is also nice that it comes shipped with its own Go client, so I don't think you even have to use the wire protocol if you're running on the same.
That is cool. Now this thing has me interested in reevaluating SQLite in some of my life choices.
Drop this a star while we're talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a month old, so I mean, don't go deploy anything critical in production with it.
I like to live on the edge of the seat.
Last commit was like a month ago. No, the first commit was a month ago, so careful out there, people.
I think that I feel like SQLite also is having kind of a resurgence in Go specifically, because there was I don't remember his name, but there's a guy that's been basically working on trying to make it so you can have SQLite in pure Go, so you don't have to use CGo. And I think that actually just went 1.0 recently, or got to like some very stable point, so you can start using it more. And it literally is a drop-in replacement for SQLite, which means that if you want to use SQLite but in Go, you don't have to use CGo, which I think is a huge advantage and really opens the opportunities. I mean, SQLite was pretty easy to embed into Go in the first place because it's packaged and shipped as a single C file with no dependencies. So it's, as far as things that you integrate into Go from C land, it's pretty easy to do. But just having it so you can like still do cross compiling and all of that easily is like a huge advantage.
We should do an episode on licensing, because I'm still, when I see like licenses, like the only thing I know is MIT good, everything else suspect, right? If I see like BSD3 clause, blah blah blah, like now I need to go do research, right, to see if I can go get this thing.
I mean, BSD
right?
and MIT are the two, like, yeah, and do what you want, bro. Those are basically the attitude of those licenses.
I think we should do an episode on licenses.
We could probably get Louis Villa back because he's a lawyer. We talked to him about other IP based stuff. It'd be an interesting thing to talk about licenses with him.
If he's on an episode, you'll want to listen. Those are the best episodes we've ever made, in my opinion.
And I think you said that in episode 300. So in the This Is Sparta episode that Johnny likes so much, even though it's a 20-year-old movie.
This is Sparta.
So what else? Are we all newsed up or?
I think there's a couple other news things we can talk about if we'd like to talk about them, or we could do a nice quick round of unpopular opinions.
Let's do unpop. I got places to be.
So with that, on to unpopular opinions.
I actually think you should probably leave.
All right, Johnny, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Fork Redis. If you haven't already.
That seems to be like peak popular opinion, sir.
Oh, man. Oof. I'm having too much fun with myself.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. That was
okay. A Fork Redis. Unpopular opinion. Okay. Ian.
If you haven't already. Yeah.
I don't think fork Redis is an opinion. You should fork Redis? That's an opinion.
Ian, you fit in right well with us being that pedantic about things. Okay.
I actually do have an unpopular opinion.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
So I always thought the fancy office chairs were silly. Like the Herman Millers and the expensive office chairs. And I've been using a chair designed to be at a dining room table for like 2.5 years.
That sounds awful for your back, but continue.
Ian, baby, what is you doing?
My back kind of hurts. Maybe I should look at a new chair. And
you think?
So I finally bought an office chair, the Herman Miller Embody, and it is life-changing. Everyone should do this right now. My back doesn't hurt. Should have done this 2.5 years ago. So my opinion is that expensive desk chairs are not overrated.
Oh, that's like when you go from Notepad and you start coding in an actual editor. For the longest time, like, what are those fools like with their fancy syntax highlighting?
People
and error notification. Like, what is this fancy stuff? I like Notepad just fine. It works just fine.
It's like $1,000 desk chair. I'd rather have to pay for back surgery instead. Like,
oh man,
I got it cheap though. So no worries there.
Ian, my man. Wow. Okay.
I thought I was just getting old. Turns out it was sitting in a bad chair for 10 hours a day.
You've just been using a notepad of chairs for 10 years.
The notepad of chairs. I mean, when you first jump into like an IE or like a good editor, yeah, it's like, oh, okay. I mean, at least upgrade to Notepad++. Like, how are you going to be a Notepad?
Well, no, it's only available in Windows, right? Notepad++. I know that because I used it for a couple of, dare I say, years. It was the ish back then. Yeah, because it supported. Yeah, it was the ish because I could have different language syntax files in there and things. It was great.
I was great. Sublime text guy for a long time.
Eventually, weren't we all? This was like the granddaddy, right, of new age editors, right?
I never used Sublime, but that's because I went from like awful Eclipse-based IDEs into Vim, and then I was just like, okay, I'm gonna live here forever.
Oh, you went extremes. You went from Eclipse heavyweight to just
it was like one of the Eclipse like spin-offs for PHP, and then I was like, this thing takes forever to start up, so I'm using like not like BB Edit, but one of the Text Wrangler. I was like using Text Wrangler for some things, and then I was just like, I just need to learn one of these better editors. I'm in servers all the time. So it was like, do I pick Vim? Do I pick Emacs? And looked at that Firestorm, and it was like, okay, they're probably the same. And then it was like, oh, well, Vim is by default on all of the, like every system. So I'm just going to learn Vim.
But can you close it?
Listen, But can you exit out of it? The Kris probably still has the same session he opened 20 years ago. Still can't figure out how to exit.
It's like, how do I get out of here? Colon what? Colon Q, but I have a modified buffer. What do I do?
Oh man.
I do remember trying to do an interactive rebase for the very first time and literally just deleting that branch. I mean, that repo and recloning it because I couldn't get out of it. Oh gosh.
I mean, I know it's a meme. It's not that hard to get out of Vim. Like it
is if you don't know you're in Vim.
I mean, true.
Oh man. Oh y'all can't win jokes today.
I mean, I got the Vim posters. You know, it's gotta represent.
That's how you know. That's how you know. Does it have the shortcut for exiting on there?
No.
On your poster.
For anybody that's listening, it's colon Q. If you want to save and exit, don't be a fool and use an extra keystroke by doing colon WQ. Just do colon X. It's more efficient.
I didn't know that. I still used colon WQ.
Yeah. Colon X is the same thing WQ does.
Kris, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Vim is the best text editor in the world. What did I say? Yeah, no. No, let's see. Unpopular opinions. Do I have one? I mean, do I have one I want to say out loud is the real question. I probably said this one before, but speaking of editors, I'm going to say, like, go learn Vim or Emacs. Like, go learn a nice text, like a terminal-based editor. And at least try it out for a while. Because I think like, your productivity kind of, it soars in a way that I don't know it does if you use, IDEs. Nothing against IDEs. I mean, everybody likes a little point and clicky. But those terminal editors.
Listen, those are I have to disagree with your list there. Emacs is not just an editor; it is a lifestyle.
I mean, so is
you don't.
Vim,
One does not just anything with Emacs, right? Like it's a way of life. Okay, so if you want to just try some editors, you don't just try Emacs. Okay, it's an investment. You have to ease yourself in and learn the way, preferably from a guru, a master. Become a Padawan, find a Jedi master to help you out.
If you used to play the piano, Emacs is for you.
Change your keyboard layout to Dvorak and.
I mean,
is that how you say that, Dvorak? I have no idea.
But Emacs, if you like Lisp as well, Emacs is very good for Lisp. No one likes Viml. Thankfully, NeoVim, we have Lua now. And Go. You can write plugins for NeoVim and Go, which is really cool. I've been experimenting with that lately. But yeah, no, I would say my unpopular opinion is like, yeah, learn a terminal-based editor. It's not for everybody, right? Like there's a lot of, it's not like with, IntelliJ or like the kind of JetBrains IDEs where it's just like you open the thing and you're good to go, right? You have to do some configuration. You have to build the thing that you want to have. But if you figure out how to do that, it's a really nice experience. I enjoy not having to take my hands off the keyboard to do most of the writing that I want to do. So just try. That's all I'm saying. Everybody should try it out. If it's not for you, it's not for you. We all like a little bit of an exploration of ourselves on a little journey. Or as Johnny said, a lifetime saga of figuring out how Emacs works. And I mean, you're not wrong, right? Like org mode for Emacs, like some of my friends keep telling me, like, you should use org mode. It's a good way to organize your life. Like I get it. People love Emacs. People live in Emacs. They'll run their entire lives off Emacs. I mean, almost literally. They'll put all their tasks, their calendar, their to-do list. I'm sure there's a way to like check your email. Yeah, they do everything in there. So
it's a way of life. Like I said, it's a way of life.
Yeah. And maybe that way of life is for you. Try it out.
Nah, I prefer calendars. I'm good.
I mean, I hate calendars. That's a whole other rant. I don't want to.
Yeah, let's not start that.
Let's have a bonus episode of how much does Kris hate calendars? It's like, anyway, that sounds like a good place for us to end.
Kris just shows up randomly for appointments on different days and times. That's how much he hates calendars.
Look, I use calendars begrudgingly. It's just such a bad. You're gonna get me started. Like you can't.
Abort.
Unless we want to make a plus segment of this where we
No.
talk about calendars.
Abort.
Or we can just be done.
Mayday.
See,
Calendar
Johnny,
episode coming in 2 weeks.
don't troll me too much because you don't know what's going to happen. I might have a half-hour rant on calendars. All right. Well, this was a fun episode talking about some news and all that fun stuff. But yes,
we should do it more often.
Yeah. Maybe listeners, if you enjoy us talking about news, although this was also kind of like meta news plus news, but of course, Johnny made on the episode, so of course it's going to get meta. But if you like this episode on news, you want to, have us do some more news coverage, let us know. Reach out to us on the various platforms and Gopher Slack and Changelog Slack. If you're not in Changelog Slack, you should get in there. Let us know if you enjoy this, and we'll set some more up. But with that, thank you for joining me, Johnny. It was wonderful having you.
And Ian?
Yeah.
Wait, you forgot about Ian?
I was going to say, I was going to wait for you to say,
friends, Chris. I thought we were friends.
Thank you for being here. And then I was going to say, thank you for being here, Ian. I was doing the outro in the reverse order I did the intro.
You just cut him out. You just cut him.
I was not.
Oh, man.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, man.
Next time I'm going to put you last. That's what I get for being like, I'm going to go and say, thank you for joining me, Johnny. And you'd be like, oh, thanks for having me. And like, oh, and thank you as well, Ian. And you say, thank you for having me. It's like, okay, good, we're done. But we can't do that because you had to be all snooty. You think I'm not gonna do that to my friend. Ian's my friend. Yeah. Oh, rude. So rude, Johnny.
On that note,
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure having you both here, Ian, Johnny.
it was a pleasure being here, Chris.
Yes, Ian was here.
Oh, Lord. And thank you, listener, for sticking through this whole episode. And we'll catch you next time on Go Time.
I'm trading changelog sticker packs for thoughtful 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or blog posts recommending Go Time. Simply send evidence of your review or blog post to gotime@changelog.com alongside a mailing address, and I'll send you free stickers right to your mailbox. Once again, that's gotime@changelog.com. Go ahead, get your sticker on. Thanks once again to our partners at Fly.io, to our Beat Freakin' residents, Breakmaster Cylinder, and to our friends at Sentry. Use code CHANGELOG when you sign up and save $100 on their team plan. Why not, right? That's all for now, but we'll talk to you again next time on Go Time.